now. Once again, for those who are joining us, this is Ariel Tan. Thank you all for coming to my presentation today. This is my first time doing a webinar, so I'm very, very excited. Like the title suggested, this presentation will be talking about creating a strategic plan for your professional development opportunities as a graduate student. If you're a new professional or undergrad, it can also have applicable resources and tips for you as well. Let me see, how do I go to the next slide? All right, quickly, before I start, I just want to send out a quick disclaimer. So everything in this presentation is from my personal experiences. With that being said, there's also bias and privilege that I have. So just want to put this out here. You all can pick and choose whichever tip that is most applicable for you. Awesome. All right, before we start, just a quick introduction about me. I'm currently an area coordinator at California State University, Long Beach. I graduated this past May from the MA Higher Education and Student Affairs program from New York University. When I was a grad student, my internship or my assistantship was the Stevens Institute of Technology, where I worked for 2 years as a residence director. Now, with that being said, my background is from Res Lab in terms of the functional area. In my undergrad, I was a BS major in psychology from University of California, San Diego. After I graduated from my undergrad and between my grad school, I took a 2-year gap year where I was the residence relations coordinator for their family and graduate student housing. Now, prior to that, I was also a research assistant when I was an undergrad, and this played a role in my experience doing research as a grad student. There should be a slide about outline. Oh, never mind. I jumped ahead of myself. Just some quick stats in terms of what I've done as a graduate student. When I was a grad student, I did one research project. For those of you who are not familiar with the NYU program, we don't necessarily have a research track. However, I was able to do a research project on my own with a faculty mentor. In addition to that, I got 3 grants and fellowship and scholarship. I published 3 journal-blog publications. I also went through 10 different conference presentations or panel presentations. I've also done 2 departmental talk and brown bag. So the one on the left column is the bulleted information I'll be mostly focusing on. The one on the right is some other stuff I've done as a graduate student that I'm happy to share more towards the end, or in a one-on-one situation if you all want to reach out and have a conversation afterwards. So today's outline will talk about my overall approach to this idea of professional development. Quick background, I am a first-gen student. I'm also a first-gen immigrant. Now, with that being said, social capital and physical capital was something that kind of loomed on my mind when I entered grad school. So in reflection, there's an overall approach to how I approach professional development. One of my favorite word is free, and my other favorite word is on sale. So thinking about finding affordable and accessible way is something I really kind of focused on when I was a grad student. And then we'll be talking about presentations, publishing, and doing research. Lastly, I'll end with ways I find funding to go to different conferences or do different things, because again, fiscal financial resources is something that pose as a barrier for lots of grad students. Last but not least, I hope to share some tangible resources and tools with you all so you can walk away with something tangible. All right, so first, this, again, Wikipedia is not the best source of citation. However, a big keyword I'm using is strategic planning. So strategic planning, according to Wikipedia, is the organization's process of defining its strategy or directions and making decisions on allocating its resources to pursue this strategy. So I bolded strategy direction because these are the 2 keywords in terms of identifying my professional development as a grad student. So I guess the question for you all to ask as a grad student is, what are the directions I want to go in terms of my career development, in terms of my professional development, and what are the available resources? So the slide I shared with you all is an example of how I identify directions and how I allocate resources. So when I was a grad student, I was really, really interested in doing research and assessment related things. I chose NYU because you have this idea of internationalizations, which is something else I'm really passionate about within higher ed. I also like teaching and facilitating. And in terms of the topics I'm really, really passionate about, I'm really, really interested in Asian Americans, immigrants. Again, kind of have the personal narrative of being an immigrant. Also, side note, I'm a blogger, so I was also interested in learning about social media management and way that social media can relate to learning. So speaking of resources, I cannot identify the associations and committee that can help me gain more assessment or help me gain more exposure or network to all the things I'm interested in doing. I did lots of informational interviews for those who are within the realm of what I want to do, trying to gain both access and resources to information I want to have to kind of, again, furthering my journey into the direction I want to go. And I also look after collaboration opportunities. So for example, at Stevens, at the time, we didn't have lots of assessment opportunities within my area per se. So I kind of volunteered and reached out to our BPSA. Again, it's a small school, so the structure is very flat. So I shared with her, hey, Sarah, her name is Sarah Klein, shout out, great person. I reached out, I was like, hey, Sarah, you know, I'm really, really interested in doing assessments. What are some things I can help you with? And then she reached out, I was like, oh, well, actually, we're doing assessments in orientation. Do you want to help out? So there's definitely collaboration opportunities outside of your current assistantship if you're seeking those opportunities. Self-learning is a big keyword. I'm going to talk more about this in the coming slide. So a big part of grad school is about finding what you want to learn and kind of expose yourself into those directions. I'm about to say something very controversial. In grad school, you probably don't have enough time to read all the documents or all the readings that are assigned by professor. And in reality, the amount of reading assigned to us is also not necessarily realistic. So with that being said, I think it's kind of up to you to prioritize which reading you want to, you know, expose yourself more, prioritize which reading you want to read more, because going back to the direction. So what is a resource that's available to kind of extend your journey in your direction? And last but not least, I added branding. I said branding through your work. Again, the idea is you have to prioritize yourself. You have to prioritize your time. And with that being said, you also have to prioritize how you want yourself show up into workspaces. To summarize it, I just hope we can all work hard towards the direction we're going. So speaking of professional development, I think it's going to be important to define what that is, since professionalism is a very coded word that has privilege and oppression attached to it. So again, not the best source of citation, Wikipedia. Professional development is the learning to earn or maintain professional credentials, and is described as the intensive and collaborative, ideally incorporating an evaluative stage. Again, I bolded a key word. So for me, I've defined professional development as how I learn to be a better and more competent personnel, student affairs professionals, and be a scholar within the field. The part about intensive, I read it as being intentional and collaborative, again, finding out those collaboration and collaborative opportunities. And the part about evaluation is, that means I have to do some sort of constant reflection as I'm growing to see which of my strengths are being strengthening throughout my professional development, and which are the things I have more areas of growth. So my overall approach, before I start anything, I just want to say Devo is more than network, attendance, or membership in anything. For me, professional development is skill attainment and improvement and portfolio building, kind of echoing to the earlier slide about learning. So with that being said, this is something that was shared with me by a mentor. It was like the first semester of grad school, I was doing information interview, and I asked a really, really seasoned professional, what are the most underutilized professional development that you've seen among new professionals? And his answer was writing and reading. At the time, I was like, okay, well, not sure where we're going with this. But now I think what I really benefit from that statement in terms of, one, writing, whether or not it's reflection, whether or not it's journal, those are great ways for you to reflect on what you learn, for you to synthesize what you learn, and also for you to publish. I'm going to talk about publication in a later slide, but I just want to start by saying don't take your writing classes or writing assignment as like a punitive work, because those work are a way for you to build up your professional portfolio and to practice your writing skills. And reading, similarly, like I mentioned earlier, even though it's kind of unrealistic for us to read all the reading that's assigned to us, what are the ones that you're most passionate about? So the example I gave in a different presentation was, if you are interested in multicultural affairs, I would then read all, if most, if not all, the reading assigned in diversity classes, because those are the ones that are most close to my passionate area. That's going to give me more competency and more skills to exceed and excel in those areas. Collaborating is another big one I kind of alluded to in the previous slide about how I was able to collaborate different offices and different committees to do the things I'm unable to do within my current role, which is something I suggest you all to consider. Presenting and teaching is another thing. So I really like teaching and presenting. So one of the questions for you all to kind of think and ask is, if this is something that you are interested in, and if this is something that you want to do, what are the existing presenting opportunities? And this means more than conference. Are you able to present in an RA workshop? Are you able to present in a local conference that's geared to undergraduate student? Are you able to facilitate in a particular workshop during orientation, et cetera, et cetera? Because in the end of the day, those are presentation skills you are trying to hone in, and those are teaching experiences you are able to elaborate in your future interviews, et cetera. Moving on, so leadership is more than a title or access to power and privilege. It's about coping with change. So this particular thing kind of showed up as I was interviewing. So the part about coping with change is this expectation that you should understand and be able to respond to the trend within our field and within this nation. So with that being said, echoing back to the reading piece, I think it's very important for us to stay up to date with current events, whether or not that's about reading newsletter that different organizations send out that kind of recaps the policies. For example, NASPA does both the grad student and new professional knowledge committee, as well as the NASPA overall policy newsletter. They do send out monthly newsletter to kind of recap the important issues and the prominent issue that's faced in higher ed, which are things I think is important for us to know, because in the end of the day, if you are exercising leadership, it's about coping with changes and understanding the student's need. In addition to that, it's just implementing, creating, and improving practices. So currently, whether or not it's in your class or in your assistantship, is there a process and procedure that could be improved through a creation of a form, through a creation of a documentation, or through a creation of a training? If there is, I think this is a great opportunity for you all to exercise your leadership within your locus of control. Lastly, just planning ahead or accordingly. A big keyword within grad student affairs is time management. So planning ahead, thinking ahead, and planning accordingly, thinking realistically in terms of your assignments, in terms of your current work, as well as in terms of just the resources you have and the time that you have to allocate for those goals that you have. We'll go over this in the presentation slide, because I'll be talking about time management over there in a few seconds. And another big theme that kind of became apparent to me towards the end of my grad school year is that my master's degree and assistantship are my professional development to begin with. So the idea is that if I do my current work really, really well, if I do my schoolwork really, really well, that should prepare me at least 80%, if not 90%, if not 100% of how to be a good professional in my future career. This became even more apparent in the interaction I had with the first year. So I was mentoring a first year grad student in my program, and one of the things that she shared with me is she became really frustrated because she wanted to do all these additional things that she's unable to do because of time, because she was working a very demanding assistantship. Additionally, there's also conflict with regards to how she wanted allocate her free time to do those things that she wanted versus the things that her supervisor suggested her to do to enhance and improve her current competencies. So my suggestion for her was, I think you should prioritize your current work, and I think that you should prioritize your current schoolwork, because one, school is investment. The last thing I want someone to do is unable to graduate in time because of all the additional things that they're doing. In addition to this, your current assistantship means that this is your future network, this is your future reference. So I think doing your current work really, really well before you start doing anything else is very important. Going back to the whole definition piece, so for me, I think my grad school experience and my assistantship in itself is a process of implementing knowledge and receiving professional training. That means that before I do anything else, I want to make sure that I'm doing my schoolwork correctly, and I'm, fulfilling my accountability and responsibilities within my assistantship. Again, just the second and third bullet kind of talks about echoing that particular theme. Last but not least, so going back to the memory lane, Ariel, first year grad students want to find out how she can get involved and develop professionally. And one of the other pieces that you receive from another very seasoned professional is that less is more. The particular word that she uses, nobody wants someone who can do a little bit of everything but do it mediocrely. Everyone wants someone who can do their job really, really well and is an expert in something. So that's where the jack of all trades versus the expert coming from. When I was a grad student, I was really frustrated. First year, I was really frustrated because, one, I have people telling me that, hey, Ariel, grad school is a time where you can do a little of everything. You should really capitalize and seize your opportunity. But I also have people who are like, Ariel, I think you should really focus on these 3 areas and do them really, really well. After that conversation, I took the latter, which turned out to be a really, really good suggestion, because the idea is that you are, one, being realistic about your time management, and 2, you doing less does not mean that you're working any less harder. If you do less, you can also do those things better. So I say this, the takeaway and the suggestion is for you all to identify 1 to 3 areas that you really want to kind of hone your expertise in. For me, it was internationalization, it was assessment and research. So those things are the ones that I spend a lot of time to kind of hone in. The last piece, my functional areas in res life. So how can I be a better supervisor? How can I be a better person to develop and implement the curriculum approach is something that I end up, honing and spending my time on. Lastly, just stay true to yourself. I'm an extrovert by nature. I don't know if you can tell by the amount of words that's coming out of my mouth. So I get excited and rejuvenated by this involvement. I love presenting because this is one way for me to get energized and for me to bring back my passion. So with that being said, if you are like, okay, look, I'm an introvert, or like this presentation is not my thing, research is not my thing, that's okay to be realistic and be true to yourself in terms of what are things I'm really, really passionate about, and put your heart behind those topics as opposed to do what other people have been telling you, because it might not work, And then the part about reflection is the same the seasoned professional who shared with me about less is more also told me that your resume should always be ready for interview or for a job search. The idea is that for you to review your resume and see it constantly, so you can, 1, figure out what additional experiences that you are getting, but also 2, document and record the projects and the skills and the accomplishment that you've been doing. Many of us, myself, most, like for example me, when I write resume, sometimes I forget the things I've done, sometimes I forget how to verbalize the achievements I've done. So for me to constantly do a resume review this was like the second half of my first grad school and like the first half of the second year, which is also the job search time. This reflection helped me to, 1, continually improve and critique my resumes, so I don't have to do a 2-day cram session before a job application's due. But also it helped me to kind of reevaluate, okay, what is the things I'm currently doing really well versus what is the additional things I need to do so that I can be better at X, Y, and Z. All right. So a lot of us are interested in presentation. So I just want to kind of go in details to share about presentations. So these are the presentations I've done when I was a grad student. On the left side is a conference educational sessions. These are the traditional, like you stand up, you share, you talk. The one on the right is a panel presentation. These are the one where I'm a guest speaker, where I'm sharing my experience through a Q&A session. So my overall reflection and tips is that don't underestimate your class assignment or group projects. So for example, which is kind of circling back to what I said, don't take your writing and don't take your reading less seriously just because you think it's a punitive work, because, you know, a lot of work at grad school as a grad student. So when I was in grad school, we were taking a class about Foundation of Higher Education, that's what it's called. And I wrote a paper about Asian American students' experience. And that paper ended up turning into a presentation I've done at NYU's conference that talk about the challenges and the experience of Asian American students within the US higher ed. That's a very classic example of how a paper changed our presentation. In addition to that, I'm sure that a lot of us have classes that talk about doing group project and group presentation. One of my three of my classmates, they were able to turn their presentation about supporting undocumented students for a class into an ACPA presentation this past year, or this past March in Boston. So again, don't underestimate your class assignments and group project, which again, echo back, one, take class very seriously, two, take your writing prompt or your class assignments really, really seriously, because they are ways for you to build up your future portfolio. Because again, you don't have to start from scratch. You already have people be with you. All you have to do is refine those content into something that's more applicable or more relevant to the conference theme. Another thing is professional relationship and passion projects. The part of a professional relationship is the relationship you're building is also helpful in, you know, getting a seat or getting more additional buy-in in these presentation spaces. So for example, a classmate, so he graduated a year before me, a classmate and I, we're both Chinese. We're really, really interested in doing a presentation about Chinese or just international students in higher education and ways for them to support them and the struggle they experience when they find jobs. So as we're working on this presentation, we realize that we don't really have faculty or seasoned professionals perspective. That's the one thing that we're really lacking. So with that being said, we can now recruit it and ask one of our professor who's also a senior staff member at NYU, so that she can be on board. And she then bring up additional insight and folks from Columbia University. So we were able to put a more robust presentation. And because of these additional add-on, it also make our proposal more applicable and more robust. The part of passion projects is similar to the idea that finding things that kind of like passionate and close to your heart. The example in here is when I was in undergrad, I was really interested about sexualization of video game characters and its impact on female gamers like myself. So when I was a first year in grad school, I kind of turned that into talking about how to talk about sexism or sexualization issues using video games to students as a way to kind of bridge and educate students about diversity issue through a different venue. So again, passion project can also be turned into a presentation because one of the things that I often hear is I don't know what to present. So here are all the ideas for you to present on. Another thing is time management. Mark your calendar. So I always use Google Calendar. It's pretty simple and helpful. You can use all the other resources, but the idea is that for me to mark the week before. So I mark the week before the presentation is due as a reminder, so that when the week is coming closer, I can be like, oh, okay, well, I need to work on this now, because oftentimes we just forget. I will also block off time to work on it. So what I would do as a grad student is usually is on Sunday or Saturday, I would block off a huge amount of time as my quote productivity time, and these are the times I've specifically assigned to do nothing but to do conference related proposals, but to do scholarship related applications. So blocking off time so I can allocate time ahead of time to do those things. And another thing is from my experience, the proposal itself doesn't take that long to complete. The literature review might take some longer time. Another thing is different conference have different emphasis, and different conference have different rubric that are using to measure whether or not a proposal should be admitted. So for example, ACPA and NASPA, they all have like some sort of emphasis about theory. You have to kind of talk about either one, how is your proposal related to the theme? Two, you have to talk about what is the theoretical groundwork that your proposal is talking about, essentially. So that literature review took the longest time out of the whole presentation, whereas the proposal itself is not that long. Now, with that being said, some of the local conference, for example, this past Saturday, I was at the Western Regional Career Student Affairs Conference in Chapman University. That proposal is shorter. I didn't have as a strong emphasis on theory because it was a different type of conference geared to a different type of population. Those are something that you can keep in mind in terms of A, thinking about how long it would take to write a proposal, and B, thinking about how to write your proposal so that it be more applicable to the different audience that this conference is gearing towards. Oh, thank you. Sorry, someone said they love the APA format. Thank you very much. So how to practice. My personal experience showed me that writing and submitting proposal is the best way to practice. So again, if you've never written a proposal before, I would suggest you to look up some conference, figure out, because again, you don't have to submit. You can still take time to look at the structure of what the proposer is asking and still practice on writing those. And the part about submitting proposal is, so in the beginning when I submit proposal, I never got accepted, to a point that I was like, this is disheartening. I don't like being rejected. So I reached out to one of the committee members and she's like, hey, can you give me some feedback? And this person was able to give me really, really critical feedback. In addition to this, places like NASPA and ACPA's regional conference, or different knowledge committee conference, or different topic conferences, they have a part where their proposal reviewer is going to be able to give you feedback, whether or not it's through like little word bubbles or is it through like an actual paragraph. But someone's going to be able to give you feedback for you to kind of like improve your program proposals. For example, I submitted a program proposal for the ACPA 2019, but it wasn't accepted. However, one of the feedback they gave us is that we don't have lots of time to do interactions. So for this upcoming ACPA, I submitted a proposal again, but was able to retweak my proposal to include an interactive piece. I don't know if it's accepted yet, but that's just an example of how you can take feedback and use submitting proposal as a way to practice writing proposals. Another thing is become proposal reviewers. Again, you don't have to have a huge long credential to apply or become a proposal reviewers. ACPA is always asking for it. NASPA is always asking for it for their annual conference. There's an application process, obviously, but you can apply. Again, you don't have to have a really long credential to be a conference reviewer. You just have to show relevant experience and expertise in whatever topics. So using myself as an example, I have a lot of experience helping assisting international students. I've also done research about Asian American students. So those are the areas that I'm able to become a conference reviewer, conference proposal reviewers. And the benefit of becoming a reviewer is you're able to know the rubric. So you kind of know like, oh, what are they looking for? Which kind of leads to my second part about in your proposal. But before we go back to the in your proposal part, just to finish up the how to practice part, take notes in other people's sessions. If you go to a presentation session, if someone's giving you really, really good content that can inspire you, take notes in them. You can also connect with the presenter to see if there's potential opportunity for you all to collaborate in the future. And most importantly, if they're doing some sort of activity that are really helpful and inspire you, take notes in them so that you can utilize it in your future conference proposals. In your proposal, here are the part that are actually tangible for you all to take away. Always include some sort of reference to relevant literature. Again, different type of conference will value this piece differently. So for some, they'll want you have a whole session dedicated for literature review. For some, you can just make a reference like 1, 2, or 3 sentences in your actual description. So kind of weigh on that based on the scale of the conference. Again, national, bigger ones tend to have a more emphasis on relevant literature. And 2, kind of your target audience. Is this conference geared towards like faculty, scholars, or is this conference geared towards like new pros, grad students, et cetera, et cetera. In the description point, or in the description section, I would suggest you all to give detailed time breakdown. So for the first 10 minutes, icebreaker, introduction, participant will do X, Y, and Z. In the next 10 to 15 minutes, participant will learn about X, Y, and Z, because the idea is for the program reviewers, they'll have to make a judgment based on whether or not you can accomplish all the learning goals that you listed earlier in the 50 to 1 hour you're allocated. So if you can give a detailed time breakdown and make your presentation more realistic, it shows that one, that you have thought ahead about your presentation, so there's a structure, and two, it's easier for the reviewers to have an idea of like, oh, okay, this person is able to hit all 3 learning outcomes within the hour we're giving them. Another part is having definite learning outcome. Again, some conference will ask you to specifically list out learning outcome. Some conference will not. So kind of like use that, use it as with your best judgment. My suggestion is it's still helpful to have some, so participant will walk away with X, Y, and Z, so that you can, in a way, structure your conference description according to the learning outcome you have. I hope that makes sense. Another piece is just having takeaways. One of the best advice I've got is, if anything, always have like physical takeaway, whether or not it's like a piece of paper with all the resources, a piece of paper with all the references, or a piece of paper with all the relevant theory or all the people or program you mentioned in the presentation. Because again, these are physical takeaways that you can kind of elaborate in your proposal, that participant will walk away with physical takeaway to learn about X, Y, and Z. Lastly, just interaction engagements. Again, I know that some conferences give people points about whether or not your presentation is engaging and interactive. So use your best judgment. Should you include a poll everywhere activity? Should you have more parent share? Should you have a Q&A discussion, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm gonna drink some water just because it's kind of, all right, cool. Sorry about that. Other tips. Always subscribe and read newsletter. So I know many of us are subscribed to 5 million different things. However, we may not have time to read it. All the conference proposal calls I've received from either newsletters or Facebook posts. So again, if you are subscribed to a newsletter, it doesn't hurt to take a few moments to scroll it down to see if there's any important content for you to take note, or if there is a conference proposal that's coming up. Another thing is recruit people to work together and be willing to pull the weight. This is the example I want to give. This is this past summer, there was 4 of us in my cohort who all either studied abroad or worked abroad for internship. So I wanted to pull together a presentation about, doing student affairs overseas experience. So what I did, I reached out to the 3 people. I was like, hey, do you want to do this together? Everyone's like, yeah, let's do it. However, I did end up being the person who's writing the majority of the conference proposal. Because again, if this is something that I really, really want to do, I'm really, really passionate about, I'm happy and I'm willing to pull the weight. So that's just an example. Again, even everyone was busy, so it's nobody's fault. But I'm just sharing this with you all, that if you have something that you're really, really passionate about, that you really want to make it work, be willing to pull the weight and be willing to be the person who's recruiting, to coordinate, because again, no one else is going to do it for you. Brain dump. So I'm a bullet journaler on my side time, and in bullet journaling, there's an idea called brain dump, where you are writing down all the tips, suggestions, all the epiphanies that you have throughout your time. So I do have a brain dump as well for my conference presentation, or any kind of professional development things I want to write about, present about, talk about, interview about, so that when time comes around, I have a list of ideas that I previously thought about to go back and kind of elaborate on, so I don't have to come up with something for the sake of coming up with something. So that was about publication, and we're doing good on time. That was about presentation. Now we're moving to publication. It seems like this is not necessarily something that everyone is excited about. So I'm just gonna, breeze this through relatively quickly. The overall reflection is take writing seriously. I take my writing very, very seriously. I write on important issue that's close to my heart, that's kind of close to the current climate within the field. I don't necessarily BS paper just because I want the time I'm putting in this paper to be able to utilize properly and efficiently, and I want my time and effort to be able to recycle into something, you know, better and bigger. Revise constantly is another piece of advice I give. Just again, English is my second language. I'm not really a confident writer, so revising constantly just something that I keep doing to kind of improve my writing, but also improve my content quality. Another piece is about publishing in journal and publishing in blog or magazine. So I publish in journal for my own academic improvement, and I also publish in my blog and magazine for my own professional development. This is really helpful in the sense that think about marketing or think about branding. So I wrote a piece about my experience working at NYU Shanghai this past summer, and after that was published in NASPA's Gap blog, someone was able to reach out to me and be like, hey, I'd like to learn more about your experience so that A, I can increase my network, and B, it kind of builds into the narrative of like, I'm interested in internationalization, I'm interested in learning more about internationalization in higher ed. So that's like the piece where publishing in a blog or publishing in a magazine really helps. And again, you can use your current writing assignment. If you have to write a reflection about your experience as a new professional, you can use that reflection, refine it, and then submit it for a blog. Some of us are interested in research, so I'm just going to kind of review the timeline. So this is a timeline that it took me to finish my research project. Again, I know that some programs, so for example, here at CSU Long Beach, our grad students within their higher ed program has a thesis track. So the program is structured in a way to support writing a thesis and doing research. NYU's program is not necessarily designed to be that way, so you have to find out additional opportunity, which is why it was helpful that I had prior research experience in my undergrad as a psych major. So long story short, I started, having idea and expressing my idea to do research in September. I came out with an idea and literature review in November. And the next year, around the spring semester time, is where all these things start getting momentum and start being pushing forward. I got the grant, I got the IRB. I attended the ACPA, which is, again, a really, really rejuvenating experience for me to kind of reaffirm my passion for doing this research project, so to speak. And eventually, I did a data collection between the September of 2018 to January, and I finished my writing in February. This paper was, the first half of this paper was published, and I was able to present this paper at NASPA in LA this past March. So my overall reflection about research is just do it, even though it means on your own. So there's lots of work and learning on your own. Again, this is something I've learned when I was in undergrad, because again, I had a research topic that I was really interested in, but no one else was interested in. So I had to do a lot of those work on my own. Be ready to go back and forth with regards to finding out the right advisor, finding the topic that you want. Because again, when I first had this idea of doing research, it was something completely different than what it has in the end. This is a very, very stereotypical narratives you will hear about people who do research, like it started in this way and then end up in something else. So just be ready and be willing to do a lot of learning on your own. This means you have to do outreach, do information interview with faculties and grad students who are PhD students who are doing research. Sometimes it means getting rejected. People might not respond to your email. People might say that, oh, I don't actually want to support you, or I don't have time, or I don't really, see where this is going. So just be ready to get rejected is what I'm trying to say. If you're doing research, you will need a level of stat skills. I'm a quantitative researcher, which is why it's bolded. If you're a qualitative researcher, you'll have to know how to do interview, how to do code, all that good stuff. You also have to communicate that you are serious and capable of doing this. In my experience, I felt that oftentimes there's a lot of faculties who might not necessarily be on board with you until you can show them that you can do this. You can do this for real and you're very serious about it. Because again, just think think realistically, the faculty also have limited time and resources on their hands. So unless you can show them this is like an 80% almost done product, it might be hard for them to have that buy-in with you or to support you or to guide you, to mentor you, all that good stuff. So yes, so the one that's italicized and in the teal color is the actual like tips and things I've done that was really helpful. I show up with my own agenda and my portfolio of research with my advisor. I'd be like, hey, look, Greg, this is what I want to do. This is what I've been done. What do you think? So again, show up with an agenda in your faculty advisor meetings. Ask around for opportunities, develop a timeline. So all these were almost have to write a proposal for my faculty so that they can be on board with my research, so to speak. Propose studies with literature reviews. Again, instead of waiting for faculties to give you directions, I would suggest you all to start just randomly search up like keywords in your what do you call them again? In your school libraries journal research search engine, there we go. Just start looking up studies, start summarizing them, and start writing literature review on your own. You can also use the classes you're taking and all those literature review you have to write for classes as an opportunity for you to do pre-work for research. And again, just read and do literature review on your own. Assessment is research in practice. It's another thing. All the things I've italicized and in teal is the actual examples of things or assessment projects I've done when I was a grad assistant. So I did the study factor thing. I looked into the work order and program summary, orientation assessments. When I was in NYU Shanghai, I came out with this assessment proposal. For assessments for different offices, I'm mostly doing data segregations and visualizations and synthesis, which means that I don't necessarily need to have a lot of, stats background to do all these things, because in another day, I'm trying to tell a story with the numbers, with the stories, with the data that I have. So office-sponsored assessment can jump around IRB, and it can be presentable and publishable, because one of the challenges we often face as grad student is like, okay, well, I want to do this thing, but I want to make it presentable. So if you're doing something for an office, you can collaborate with the office in submitting a proposal for whatever conference relevant to that particular office initiative and make a presentable presentation and add it to your portfolio. All right, money. Money is our favorite topic. So about grants, scholarship, and fellowships. Where is the example? Okay, so the information is always online, on social media, on newsletter. It's just a matter of to get those information, to read those information, and to apply those information. So from my experience, New Professional Committee usually has money and has to fund you to participate in different conference or in different initiatives, whether or not it's like a daily symposium or it's like a regional conference. For example, Western Regional Conference that's coming up in NASPA Region 6, they have where they had money allocated for new pros and grad students. I'm pretty sure new pros and the grad students to go to the conference in Portland in this upcoming November. Like personal statements in most of the application for conference scholarships or money or grants, you will have to provide an actual examples and how you were involved and how this particular experience can enhance your professional development or your professional journey or even your scholastic journey. So the example that I have is this is in 2016, it was my first year getting involved in WCUHO, which is WCUHO-I's Western Regional Association. For those of you who are outside of housing, the WCUHO-I is the overarching international organization for housing and residence life functional areas. So long story short, they had a application for a WCUHO-I scholarship. I applied, and in my application, I have to talk about to what extent am I involved in this current committee or current organization? B, how can this experience strengthening my future development? And C, what are my plans to bring back, the knowledge I've learned at WCUHO-I to give back to my community? So very similar to personal statement in the extent that you have to give out examples, which is why for you to stay actively involved in organization becomes really, really important and helpful in applying for these funding opportunities. If you can make a case for a presentation and award, your organization will be more likely to support for your attendance. So for example, again, this is the Western Regional Akuhoai or Housing Association. They had the Equity and Diversity Awareness Award. One year I was an award recipient. This is a time when I was working as a full-time staff at UC San Diego before my grad school journey in New York. So I got this award. I shared my concern, or I shared my proposal and my happy news with my organization, with my department. So my department became more happy and more open to fund me to attend this particular conference. Another thing is look into your school. Sorry, I'm getting dry throat again. Most schools have professional development fund for students. So using CSULB as an example, they have ASI, which is a student union. They have money allocated for students who are presenting, so they can reimburse up to, I forgot how much, but up to like $200, $300 for your conference attendance when you're presenting. NYU has something very similar. So for us, our graduate student organization and the Steinhardts have money allocated for students who are doing professional development and who are reimbursed up to $250. Back at UCSD, when I was a student, my department, I was a psych major, my department has travel grants for students who are doing presentations, who are, again, traveling to a particular conference. So there's a development fund for students, which I suggest you to look into A, your department, B, your student organization, and C, your student government. For professionals, so if you are a working professional, sometimes I only had one experience. So when I was at UCSD, they had the Student Staff Association that gave up to, I think, $450 for reimbursement of some sort of professional development opportunity, whether or not that's going to a conference, buying a book, registering for a class. So I used that money to reimburse a portion of the money that I spent to get my college counseling certificate. So these are also internal funding opportunities for you all to kind of like look after or be mindful of. All right, so resources and tools, these are the tangible things that we can share, or I hope to share so you all can take away. So NASPA, ACPA, and Kuhoai all have competencies. So NASPA, ACPA has like one version, Kuhoai has another version. Again, my background is in housing, so I'm not sure if other organizations have a similar curriculum or competency guide developed, but what's really helpful with these competency is they kind of outline things that you can get involved. So using NASPA ACPA as an example, they have 8 different competency for you to kind of look. They also divide it into what is a beginner stage, intermediate stage, advanced stage. So it's almost like a rubric for you to measure your current involvement again, so you can figure out what are some additional opportunities you should sought after. Because again, speaking of social capital as a first gen, you don't know what you don't know. So having these outline can be really, really helpful for you all to kind of think about, again, what's out there for me to get and what I kind of want to spend my time and resources to get. ACPA or curriculum, you don't have to be a part of ACPA ambassador to have access to that information, is online, because ACPA currently is really, really big on decolonization of the higher ed field. So they have the particular curriculum where there's like information for y'all to read, information for y'all to watch. Again, free webinars, and you don't have to be a part of this ambassador involvement to have access info, at least the last time I checked, which is this past semester. Organizations' YouTube channel. So a lot of organizations upload their videos onto YouTube channels. So for example, so this past year in March at NASPA's annual conference in LA, they had these roundtable sessions where they talk about hot topic within higher ed, Title IX, DACA, all these important issues. If you are unable to attend the conference, those content are still on their organization's YouTube channel for you to have access and take a look. Because as they speak, same thing, they're all uploaded. Again, free resources for y'all to have access of. If you just Google SA Pro or student affairs professional development or assessment guide, there's a lot of free examples and resources that are online. Basically, they are either templates or like assessment guides for you all to fill out, to kind of figure out what is, like what have you done so far and what are the things that needs to be done to kind of enhance those competency area. Another example is, I would just want to say this past week, I remember seeing this post. Someone has asked a question about, does anybody have a professional development guide that I can use within the student affairs millennial Facebook group, I want to say. And then there's a really lovely person. Her first name is Anna. And then Anna was able to share her resources and uploaded, which again is a professional development plan and guide for you all to use as a reference. Again, new professional committee and programs oftentimes do have programs that's gearing towards new professionals and grad students. So they are really good places to subscribe to their newsletters, check out their content constantly, and also just get involved, whether or not that's volunteering in a local conference or participating in their monthly call. Capstone worksheet, which is something I'm going to go over in a second, is something unique to NYU. Webinars and free classes. NASPA has some free webinars and free classes you all can have access to. Canvas. This is not the what's the word I'm looking for? This is not the graphic design website I'm referring to, or like the Canvas related to your school. So you just go to canvas.com. Sometimes school will give free classes. So for example, before my grad school experience, Colorado State University offered like a free non-credit class on Canva about student affairs. That was really helpful. They also offer one about assessment, which again, very, very helpful. So these are free resources for y'all to take away. Explore websites and social media groups. They sometimes have tag features that are really helpful. One of the current popular things people tend to do is to subscribe to a hashtag on Twitter, things like that. These are information for you to, again, these are small professional development opportunities for you to have kind of have an idea of what's going on within the field. Take advantage of podcasts and blogs. I'm not sponsored by Presence, but I know that Presence.io has lots of great content for you all to read and to write about, or kind of elaborate and share with your group. And all these are free resources and free involvement. Just to talk about the capstone thing. So NYU has a capstone point system we have to complete in order to receive and fulfill our degree. So this is an example of what they look like. So this is the capstone activity related to membership. So, you know, join a professional org, serve as a volunteer, run for an office, you know, serve on e-board. There's also supplementary involvement, participate in webinar like right now, develop a professional website, you know, participate in this training, and there's also part-time student opportunity for you to receive a promotion, and submit different proposal and presentations, submit a grant proposal, etc. And the key, or the point I'm showing this whole thing is to emphasize that there's lots of action verb, more than just attend. So there's develop, there's volunteer, run for office, serve as, publish, submit. So more than just attend something. The idea is that being a part of an association gave you access and resources, but you also have to do something with those access and resources, whether or not that's about volunteering your time and submitting proposal, etc. Another thing, just keep up with current events, because in another day, we want to be leader within our own scope and locus of control. And part of that leadership shows the ways for us to respond to different changes. So we need to A, know the current events, understand how they impact our campus and climate and our students in general. And B, just think about strategies and realistic things you can do within your career. That was a lot of information. To end, I just want to highlight that it's a privilege. So I'm very privileged to have all these access and resources and the support I receive as a grad student. And it also is a personal choice, because again, we only have 24 hours during our day. We only have 2 to 3 years in our grad school programs. So how do you, going back to the first slide, how do you allocate your resources and what direction you can go is something that's very helpful for you all to keep in mind as you're developing your own strategic plan. That's all. Whew. We have 6 minutes left. That was a lot of content in an hour.
Ariel, thank you so much for sharing that. For those of you who want to get in touch with Ariel, I really highly suggest that you email her, follow her on social media. She's incredibly responsive and obviously incredibly enthusiastic about this field, and that is really the level that we are hoping all of you sort of feel, even if you are not doing it or expressing it in that like extroverted way. Everybody sort of has different ways to do that. A couple of things, Ariel, I really wanted to highlight from your presentation that I thought was absolutely excellent is 100% the idea of the multitasker. Higher ed folks always talk about all the hats that we wear and all of the other duties as assigned. It took me a really long time in my own professional development. I'm coming up on 18 years in this field, and I can tell you right now, having read and done a lot of interviews, multitasking is not always a plus in many ways, you know, like Ariel mentioned, you know, it's really great to do really well in a few things and highlight those things that you do, because at the end of the day, it's just really hard to be able to accomplish all of, you know, the many things that you do. Plus, you're also in many ways setting yourself up as you're looking for careers after graduate school. If you're like, I can do everything, you've set yourself up in that interview to say, you can expect me to do everything versus I'm very good at these few things. So you're setting your expectations for your supervisors at that point. And at some point, it's going to be really hard because life, outside factors, and all of these things are going to come into play. The other thing that I really appreciated, Ariel, that you highlighted was the fact that it's okay to not get accepted all the time. Rejection is a massive part of life in grad school and your professional development. And I think that many people are hesitant to put in those conference proposals because there is that fear of rejection. But like Ariel said, you really only learn from all of those opportunities, and you can take that as a way to as professional development, to get better at writing program proposals, at presenting. So I really enjoyed hearing how candid you were about those few things and really about your experiences. So Ariel, thank you so much for sharing that with everybody. And that was a lot. So if anybody has, again, really specific questions, or if you want to go into detail with Ariel about some or all of the things that she talked about, I'm sure she would be happy to hear from you. Ariel, any closing words, or does anyone have like a burning question that they really want to ask right now?
I just have one. Thank you, Jordana, for affirming everything I have to say. Sometimes it is kind of intimidating just to make sure I'm also sharing experience that are relevant, given that I'm a new professional myself. Again, if you have questions, you're welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn or reach out to me via email. I do want to highlight one thing, because thinking about the tangible things you all can walk away with, because, you know, realistic expectations. I do want to share that there's 3 scholarships I got was really big. One of them is ACPA Next Gen Institute, so you can write that and, you know, search more about it. I was nominated by a colleague, and you have to apply, and this particular Next Gen Institute allowed me to give me a portion of reimbursement for my flight for ACPA, and he also kind of waived my registration for the institute as well as the conference itself. I have to apply to it as well, kind of going back to the whole personal statement piece, but it's a really good opportunity, so I think you all should look into. I was able to receive I was fortunate enough to receive the NASPA Jim Radigan Fellowship this past year, which is a package that's kind of equivalent to $1,000 that allowed me to come out and participate in the NASPA annual conference. I found this information online, so just Google that particular keyword. You have to make a video about it, but again, all the information is online. Lastly is the research grant that's really unique to my institution. It was an email advertisement. I had to apply, I had to get a lot of support. So going back to your own institutions, kind of ask around to your program administrator, ask around to your colleague and cohorts and classmates to see if there have other funding existing within your institution that you can apply to. Because I know that money is very important for a lot of us.
Awesome. Well, folks, make sure you get in touch with Ariel. And Ariel, whenever you get a chance, feel free to send me your slide deck or any information or materials that I can share with the gaps. And I'll actually add you to their cohort's Facebook page, so that way you can just directly post on Facebook. And anything that is a link or something that's emailable, I'll be sending out our What's Up Wednesday newsletter this week. So I'm happy to add any of that information for you.
Thank you, Jordana. It's good to see you. Thank
You
you, everyone, for
too.
spending this lovely hour with me.
Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your week.
Bye. Thank you.